If the present state of a nation can be distilled into a single figure, for New Zealand it is this: 73,852. In the 12 months leading to August 2025, this was the number of its citizens who emigrated. 73,852 people who packed their lives into suitcases and booked one-way tickets out of the isolated island nation in search of a new beginning. Broken down, the number represents 202 souls a day, nearly enough to fill an Air New Zealand A321 aircraft taking flight with no return. It is a figure that eclipses the country's total losses in 2 world wars combined. A ghost city whose population would rank as the nation's 9th largest. What makes the problem more glaring is the profile of those who are leaving. More than a third are between the ages of 18 and 30, the very generation meant to build the country's future. And this is not a sudden rupture. It is the culmination of a long structural bleed. For more than a decade, the tide of long-term immigration has been steadily rising. From 2015 to 2025, the cumulative total stands at 454,000, a population larger than any New Zealand city, save for Auckland. This is not a fluke, it is a sign of the times. The destination for this vast diaspora reveals a telling truth. The vast majority are headed across the Tasman Sea to Australia, and it is the uniquely intimate relationship between these two countries that sits at the heart of this developing demographic crisis. Across the entire English-speaking world, even within the core 5 nations of the Anglosphere, no two are as culturally, politically, and economically intertwined. It is a kinship felt on the rugby pitch, a shared pride in a meringue dessert called pavlova, an accent that, to the untrained ear, blurs at the edges. But culture is merely the visible surface. Beneath it lies a political arrangement of profound consequence. For a New Zealand citizen to visit Australia, all that is required is a passport. Should they wish to stay and find work, the requirement remains the same. And should they decide to live there, to build a new life indefinitely, the answer is unchanged. Just a passport. This freedom, this seamless bond forged in history and geography, has become a double-edged sword. It is a relationship so close, so porous, that it has created a path of least resistance. A quiet, gravitational pull that is now reshaping the future of an entire nation, one departure at a time. For a New Zealander, the question of a visa only arises at the precipice of state support. The path to citizenship itself is a quiet formality. Be present in the country for 4 years, a full-time resident for 1. The transition is considered so seamless, the very notion of identity so fluid, that a government advisory gently asks prospective citizens to first confirm they are not, by some quirk of law, already Australian without knowing it. It is a bond that defies modern comparison. The passage between these two nations is more fluid than that between a Canadian and an American. The journey to naturalization, simpler than for any citizen moving within the European Union. This unique intimacy extends from the individual to the marketplace, where trade across the vast North American border is a gauntlet of paperwork, politics, and tariffs. Commerce between New Zealand and Australia flows as if no border exists at all. They are architects of a single economy market, an integrated space where business relations mirror those between American states or within the United Kingdom, yet free from the long shadows of historical grievance. In the movement of people, capital, and goods, there are no two other large developed countries outside of Europe that operate with such profound integration. Yet this seamless reality, this deep sense of shared destiny, is a recent invention. In the 1890s, the 6 disparate British colonies of the Australian continent began the slow, deliberate process of forging a single nation. A nascent Australian identity was stirring, fueled by anxieties over defense and the growing frustrations of a fractured internal market. To the first of the great conferences convened to hammer out the details, New Zealand sent its delegates. At home, the idea of joining this developing commonwealth was floated, debated, considered. But in the end, they declined. Much is made of the fact that Australia's 1901 Constitution left the door open for New Zealand to one day join. Far less is said of the simple truth that New Zealand did not want to walk through it. They saw themselves as a world apart, an independently governed colony with a thriving trade relationship directly with Britain. Their culture, they believed, was too distinct, their policies toward indigenous peoples too incongruous with Australia's. Their economies were not yet partners, but rivals, competing for the same distant markets. For much of the early 20th century, New Zealand charted its own course, maintaining a deliberate distance from its larger neighbor and prospering from it. Aided by the revolutionary technology of refrigerated shipping, its temperate climate became a powerhouse of animal husbandry. The two nations, born of the same empire, stood on the shores of the same ocean, yet chose to face in different directions. It was a separation born not of animosity, but of a distinct and fiercely held sense of self. And it is perhaps in this initial act of independence that the seeds of their modern, unparalleled closeness were sown. A relationship defined not by constitutional decree, but by a sovereign and continuous choice. A wildly prosperous trade relationship, forged with an ever-resource-hungry Britain, had once propelled the New Zealand economy to extraordinary heights. On the back of raw agricultural exports, a nation soared. By the 1950s, measured by gross domestic product per capita, New Zealand had become the world's third most productive, most prosperous economy. It was a golden age, seemingly without end. But then came the 1960s. With them, a cold wind of change blew in the form of synthetic wool and a seismic shift in global alliances as Britain turned its gaze toward the European Economic Community. Suddenly, an economy built on a single reliable pillar, found its foundations crumbling. A great reckoning had begun. New Zealand built factories. It explored new markets in the United States and Asia. It expanded state services. And ultimately, it faltered. In an age of global liberalization, dominated by the doctrines of Reagan and Thatcher, New Zealand underwent its own painful process of right-sizing, a shock therapy known as Rogernomics. By this point, in the 1980s, Australia's economy had surpassed the productivity of New Zealand's for good. With few other promising options, New Zealand turned to its continental neighbor to forge a new kind of relationship, one that would mirror the great economic blocs taking shape in Europe. First came the Closer Economic Relations Agreement in 1983. As tariffs and restrictions between the two countries were phased out, a new trading partnership bloomed, growing by an astonishing 500% over 20 years. It was a watershed moment. This fruitful agreement was then taken even further. In 1998, the two nations agreed that products passing inspection in one country could be sold in the other, no questions asked. This principle of mutual recognition was then extended to the workforce itself. A license to practice a profession in one country was now a license to practice in both. The relationship was crystallized with the Single Economic Market Agreement of 2009. It established trans-Tasman regulatory bodies, making it ever easier for businesses to operate across the sea, essentially transforming the hard border between two sovereign nations into something more akin to a permeable, dotted line. For both countries, coming together in a time of deep uncertainty has been a profound success, a stabilizing force in a volatile world. But for New Zealand, this extraordinary closeness has begun to reveal a difficult, perhaps unavoidable, downside. The very permeability of the border now allows Australia's immense gravitational pull to exert its force on New Zealand's most precious resource, its people. Two simple metrics illuminate the critical imbalance. With a population of 27.2 million, Australia is nearly 5 times the size of New Zealand. In wealth, the gap is just as stark. Australia ranks 12th in the world for GDP per capita at $66,000. New Zealand lags behind at 25th with $49,000. These are not mere statistics on a page. They are the brutal arithmetic of ambition and opportunity. They represent two gulfs with very real and very human consequences for the future of a nation. In solving the problems of the past, New Zealand may have created a partnership so successful, so seamless, that it now risks being slowly, quietly, and willingly absorbed. For a young mind in Auckland, standing at the precipice of a life-defining decision, the world feels vast. Yet, one path just across the Tasman Sea exerts a unique and powerful pull. The two nations are now so intimately tethered that any graduating Kiwi can journey to Australia, study without a visa, and pay the same domestic university fees as their local counterparts. The courtesy, of course, is extended in reverse. But the choice is rarely symmetrical. Consider a student seeking a sprawling campus, a broader horizon of academic inquiry. In all of New Zealand, there are 6 universities with a student body exceeding 20,000. The University of Auckland, by far the largest, stands at 45,000. In the Australian state of Victoria alone, there are 7 such institutions. In New South Wales, another 9. For the highest achievers, the disparity becomes a chasm. 4 Australian universities break into the world's top 50. New Zealand has 0. In a ranking of the region's premier universities, one must look past the top 10 to find a single New Zealand name. For the prospective student, Australia simply offers more pathways. For the ambitious, more prestigious ones. This calculus extends far beyond the campus gates. Imagine this graduate now wishes to enter the world of investment banking. In Sydney, the global titans of finance cast long shadows: Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, UBS, J.P. Morgan. The offices of Barclays, Citibank, and Bank of America are woven into the city's fabric. In Auckland, the landscape is barren by comparison. While Citibank maintains a nominal presence, the nation's banking is dominated by 4 major players. Of these, 3 are direct subsidiaries of Australian banks. The 4th was originally founded in New South Wales. The path becomes starkly clear. To enter high finance, one would attend a university from the group of 8, the region's most selective, all of which are located in Australia, and then make the pilgrimage to Sydney. The infrastructure is there. The currency is more international. The market is simply bigger. This logic, while intuitive, creates a self-perpetuating cycle. It stunts the potential of New Zealand's own financial industry, as it makes far more sense to leave than to build. The talent flows in one direction and quite possibly never returns. It may seem a small matter to lose a generation of financiers, but what is lost is more than a single profession. It is the tax dollars they would have paid. It is the wealth they would have spent in local economies. It is a quiet, continuous drain, not just of capital, but of human potential. A silent transaction where the price of proximity is a nation's brightest minds, drawn away by a gravitational force they can neither deny nor escape. In the year 2021, a simple advertisement appeared in the New Zealand Herald. It was an invitation, a promise sponsored by the state of Queensland, Australia. They sought registered nurses, offering what had become scarce at home: reasonable working conditions, livable cities, and the warmth of a different sun. Its timing was no accident. Barely a month earlier, New Zealand's own healthcare workers had taken to the streets, their demands for better pay and conditions echoing unanswered. The Australian offer was a siren song to a profession pushed to its limits. Those who made the journey west sent word back. The promise was real. Fewer patients per nurse, better pay. The result was a quiet exodus, a steady bleed of talent across the sea. By March of 2024, the numbers told a stark story. Of the 38,000 nurses newly registered in Australia that year, a staggering 10,000 were from New Zealand. It is the classic anatomy of a brain drain, a nation skilled at forging educated, capable workers, but increasingly unable to hold on to them. The skills, the ambition, the economic futures they represent, all departing for a brighter shore. The flow of people is not entirely a one-way street. Between two nations with open borders and entwined cultures, Australians do cross the Tasman to New Zealand. But they come for different reasons. They arrive not to build a career, but to end one in retirement. They come not to work, but to visit or to oversee a property investment. This brings capital, but it is a different kind of capital, money that services an existing economy rather than building a new one. Tourism is the prime example. It is a pillar of the New Zealand economy, employing directly or indirectly 10% of the population and accounting for nearly 7.5% of the nation's GDP. With between a third and a half of all visitors hailing from Australia, the entire industry is tethered to the goodwill of its neighbor. Valleys shadowed by dramatic snow-capped peaks. Tourism performs a kind of alchemy. It transforms inhospitable beauty into a thriving commercial hub. But herein lies the paradox. An industry built on transient experience offers careers that are often just as fleeting. A job at a ski resort is seasonal, lasting only from June to October. It rarely requires a degree. It relies on a workforce of the young and adventure-seeking, and the wages reflect that. The same limitations apply to the river guide, the luxury hotel attendant, the server in a bustling downtown restaurant. Employment is tethered to the season. Pay is subject to the unpredictable whims of global travel. And the jobs themselves offer a horizon that is perpetually near. One nation exports its future, its nurses, its engineers, its professionals. The other exports its leisure. It is a trade of profound imbalance, where one country's foundation is slowly eroded to service another's holiday. The work is often entry-level, a temporary rung on a ladder with few steps left to climb. The benefits are non-existent. Visitors arrive from across the Tasman Sea, their spending a welcome momentary stimulus for the economy. But the system they perpetuate offers limited long-term viability. A similar story unfolds with those who make the move permanent. The retirees, seeking a peaceful final chapter, arrive and animate the real estate market. Their disposable funds flow into local businesses. Yet, they bring little to the nation's economic output or to the health of its age pyramid. By simply buying into the market, they make the dream of home ownership just a little more distant for the average Kiwi. It is a truth easily lost in the shared heritage of Australia and New Zealand. Both are island nations, defined by their isolation, but one is a continent, vast and varied. The other is smaller, more remote, clinging to the very edge of the world. This simple geographic fact informs a powerful human current. Kiwis are not only pulled towards Australia's promise, they are pushed from their own shores by a life that is more expensive and less convenient. For many products, New Zealand's position at the terminus of global trade routes is of little consequence. Imported tea or bars of chocolate arrive at prices comparable to those in Australia. Global logistics have mastered the art of moving these small shelf-stable goods. They are easy to handle, cheap to move, and cheap to buy. But when tremors disrupt this intricate system, it is New Zealand that feels the shock most acutely. Consider a product more fragile, more difficult to transport: orange juice. In the year 2024, a distant cyclone in Brazil crippled the global supply. In Kiwi supermarkets, the price of juice began to climb. Then, the cartons disappeared from the shelves entirely. In Australia, however, the shortage was a footnote, minimized by a strong domestic orange industry, the benefit of a country spanning 3 climate zones, from arid desert to lush tropics. Even the goods New Zealand is perfectly equipped to produce can feel impossibly expensive. Its beef is a major export, a premium product on the world stage. This means that for a New Zealander to buy ground beef from their local butcher, they must compete with the global market rate. When international demand is high, they must match the price offered in faraway capitals just to entice producers to sell at home. Paying the international rate for a domestic product is a heavy burden, for purchasing power here is hamstrung by a less and less productive economy. From rent to groceries, the monthly cost of living exerts a relentless pressure. It is the quiet paradox of paradise, a nation whose greatest strengths, its pristine isolation, and its world-class agriculture, are the very things that place its own bounty just beyond the reach of its people. In the remote heart of the South Pacific, a quiet economic paradox is unfolding. New Zealand consistently ranks among the world's top 25 most expensive nations. Yet, when measured by the actual purchasing power of its people, it plummets to 36th, nestled among countries where the cost of living is a world away. For those who call this land home, the disparity is a crippling weight, a daily struggle to make ends meet in a place of profound natural wealth. Across the Tasman Sea, a different story is written. Australia, while even more costly on paper, boasts a purchasing power ranking a full 40 spots higher. There, rent may be steeper, but wages and the potential to earn rise to meet it. This economic gravity is reshaping the very nature of their bond. Increasingly, Australian corporations have become the face of New Zealand's daily life. The banks, the grocery stores, the petrol stations, the food distributors all bear the mark of Australian ownership. As more New Zealanders look across the water for opportunity, the relationship and as to resemble the interaction between a prosperous continental nation and its far-flung dependent state. The softening of borders in practice appears to be a one-way current. Australia gains access to new markets, a steady stream of hungry young professionals, and a breathtakingly convenient travel destination. New Zealand, in turn, secures an essential economic ally, a market for its goods, and an army of tourists to inject vital funds into its economy. It is an uneven agreement dictated by the unchangeable realities of size and geography. Yet, ask a Kiwi, and you are unlikely to find bitterness Ask a politician, and you will hear little animosity toward the nation that draws away some of its best and brightest. The exodus is not seen as a betrayal, but as a consequence, the price of a deal that New Zealand simply cannot afford to refuse. To remove Australia from the equation would be to condemn the nation to a deeper isolation, with even fewer prospects. A colonial enterprise from its inception, New Zealand has always been a global nation with global ambitions. But to act on those ambitions, as the most isolated major country on Earth, comes with inescapable trade-offs. It is a constant, quiet negotiation between sovereignty and survival, a bargain struck not in the halls of power, but by the simple, unyielding logic of the map. For generations, the morning ritual has been a private, often brutal, confrontation, a dance between sharp steel and sensitive skin, where the tools of the trade seemed designed for abrasion, leaving behind a familiar sting. It was a routine to be endured, not enjoyed, an act of microscopic violence repeated day after day. The modern solution, a relentless arms race of superfluous blades and lubricating strips, only seemed to deepen the problem. An entire industry was built on disposability, on marketing gimmicks and subscription models that promised closeness but delivered irritation. It created a world awash in plastic waste, where the tools we held against our own faces were designed, from the outset, to be thrown away. But in quiet workshops, where precision is not a marketing term but a law of physics, a different philosophy was taking shape. Here, in the same facilities that mill components for the aerospace industry, engineers turned their attention from the heavens to the human form. The material was not plastic, but solid aluminum, machined to tolerances measured in microns. Every element was re-examined, the angle of the blade, the architecture of its support. Each was meticulously calibrated not just for a clean shave, but for the fundamental experience. The goal was to eliminate the blade's chatter, the minute vibrations that scrape and damage the skin. The result was a tool of profound simplicity and purpose, transforming a daily chore into an act of quiet satisfaction. This was not an invention of novelty, but a return to first principles, a rebellion against a culture of planned obsolescence, proving that a single, perfectly crafted object could not only outperform a mountain of disposable alternatives, but could also elevate a mundane moment into something meaningful. It is a quiet testament that in our modern, cluttered lives, the most profound innovations are often those that simply and elegantly get it right.